Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. My name is Danielle Mitchell. I'm the CEO and founder of Black Women in Clinical Research. The mission of Black Women in Clinical Research is to educate, empower, support, and help Black women thrive in the clinical research industry. We are so glad to have you here tonight. We are going to be discussing clinical scientists, a day in the life of clinical scientists. I want to first start by introducing my co-host, Beatrice. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hey, good evening, guys. My name is Beatrice. I am a member of this wonderful group. I am a new clinical research coordinator, so I'm just excited to be here and excited to talk with you all.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. Bridget, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hello, my name is Bridget Shapatal. I started working in clinical research in 2002. I am a brand ambassador with Black Women in Clinical Research, and I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Dr. Thrasher.
Hi, I'm Patsy Thrasher, and I am a clinical scientist at BWICR Pharmaceuticals, and I'm going to be one of the people speaking today. So I'm happy to be here and happy to share whatever knowledge I have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thrasher. And our next speaker is not able to join right now, but she should be able to join shortly. Her name is Antoinette Hillian, and she is a clinical scientist. And hopefully we will be able to have her join soon and get started with answering the questions. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive in and start with the questions. So, Dr. Thrasher, what is a clinical scientist, and can you describe your typical workday?
So basically what a clinical scientist does is develop clinical trials. That's pretty much the bulk of our job. I'll define the terminology because we develop protocols, and someone recently explained to me that people, if they're new to industry. Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so we develop a clinical trial protocol. So that's basically like a recipe for how to run a clinical trial. And so my day-to-day typically is developing clinical trials. However, there are moments where I work with outside experts that work in the disease, that may treat patients in the disease indication that I'm working in, and other clinical documents. But the main thing every day is working on clinical trials, developing them.
Okay, thank you so much. And I know this wasn't part of it, but you said since you're developing clinical trials, are clinical scientists just designated to a certain therapeutic area, or do you have multiple therapeutic areas that you are developing the clinical trials for?
So that really depends on where you work. So you can work at contract clinical research organizations, or CROs as they're typically called. And in that case, that's a company where pharmaceutical companies, the people that are making the drugs, will contract those companies out to do specific work. So in that case, they may contract us out to do protocols. So I may work then with a company that is developing a drug for cancer, someone else developing a drug for diabetes. So in those environments, when I worked in CROs, yes, I could be working in a lot of different therapeutic areas for a lot of different companies. And when you go to a pharmaceutical company itself, usually they put you on a program for one drug with one therapeutic area.
Okay. Sounds good. So what exactly is the pathway to becoming a clinical scientist?
Right. So most people actually get to these scientist roles in general, like clinical scientists, regulatory scientists, non-clinical scientists, through training programs in industry. So there are companies that actually take, what they usually do is take people with advanced degrees in sciences. So whether that's a PhD, a PharmD, MD, DO, or whatnot, and they take those people and then they train them to be those types of scientists. So that's typically actually how people are getting into those roles typically.
So you have to have, usually with a clinical scientist, you have to have an advanced degree?
Well, most companies now do prefer that. Some of them, actually now a lot of them will say an advanced degree, PhD, PharmD, et cetera, in the sciences. Sometimes what you'll see, like if they're a little bit older, if they're maybe, you know, in their 50s and up, they might have like a master's or a bachelor's, but then they kind of trained into that position over time, right? When they were earlier in their career. But a lot of times now, companies do have that preference and they have that listed in the job description.
Okay, so a clinical scientist position is not something that would be an entry level position, a position that you would work your way up, like you have to go through specific training.
Right. So if you're able to get through a company that has they call them fellowships that specifically train. So what you'll come in as is they might call you a fellow or just a scientist. And then after like a year of training you to be the scientist you said you want to be, then they will officially promote you to that. But you will have already been doing that. Now, there are some instances, like I said, I've seen like older, like middle-aged CRAs who were CRAs for a very long time in transition. But I think, like I said, the market requirements have changed over time, right? So like when they came in, they were able to do that, right? Be a CRA for a few years or something and then transition. But now the companies are focusing in on the, you know, people with advanced degrees. So that's why you have these training programs that came about. So that's actually really the best way to get into those roles. Yeah.
It's starting with the fellowship.
Yep, a
Being a
fellowship.
fellow.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Well, that kind of answers my next question as far as, but maybe there might be something that you want to add to this. Like, what experience is necessary to be a successful clinical scientist?
Well, to be honest, you know, a lot of it is being able to connect the dots very quickly. To be honest, you have to be able to put two and two very quickly. So that's, I think, a lot of times, that's why they say, and at my first company where I got trained to be a clinical scientist, I actually had this conversation with them about why particularly they wanted people with advanced degrees, because it's the training that people have before coming in. So most times, right, if you go to medical school, you're out in the clinic, you're dealing with patients, or if you have a PhD or pharma, you actually did research. So you've already come in with a lot of critical thinking skills and independence. Independence is very important in the role. Being able to be given something and figure it out very quickly. And they value that because that's what scientists do all the time. That is what you do, right? Even if you were a scientist doing research on mice or whatever in your PhD or whatnot, you had to figure things out on your own, and that's what they're looking for. So that's why they prefer people with those educational experiences. So being able to put two and two very quickly is very important for sure.
Okay, so being able to put all the pieces to the puzzle together and, you know, like the basic being a scientist. Okay, I get it. So we have Dr. Hillian that was able to join us.
Hi, everyone. I'm sorry. I had
It's okay.
technical difficulties. I'm so sorry, but I'm glad I'm here.
No
Jumping
worries.
in mid-conversation.
We are glad to have you. So we were starting with, if you can give us an introduction about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So Antoine Hillian, I am up here in Cleveland. So I started also, I also have a PhD. My PhD is in genetics, doing preclinical work. I went on to do a postdoc, one postdoc for 3 years. Found out that the lab was not a good fit for me, so I wanted to transition to something else, but still use that research background. And I eventually stumbled upon clinical research overall. So my first role in this area was as a clinical research coordinator at a hospital, so at a site. I did that for 6 years. So starting off as a CRC1 with some data management duties, did that for 6 years with progressive responsibilities and duties to the point where it was almost like a de facto trial manager. And then after 6 years, I decided it was time for me to move on. And that's when I became a clinical scientist. So I just started this role last September. So I've been here not quite a year.
Okay. So I'm just gonna have you jump right in. We're gonna start with the hard question. What is the salary range for a clinical scientist?
So I looked at a few jobs, and the range I typically saw was between for a starting clinical scientist was between 110 and 140. So either with a CRO or pharmaceuticals. And then obviously with more experience, you could probably start or have a higher salary, but I think the average is probably about 120, 125.
Okay. Okay. That's definitely a good salary.
It's a decent salary. Yeah.
Right,
It's
right.
a step up. Mhm.
Right. Like anytime, yeah, 6 figures, you like, once you hit 6 figures, you like, I made it. You like, mama, I made it. Yes. So yes, that definitely is good. And okay, so I am going to hand it over to Beatrice.
All right, ladies, we are so glad that you are here. My first question, whichever one of you would like to answer that, is just how do you manage remote work? Like, just prioritizing your time and just in your organization and organizing, really.
Oh, well, for me, what I've always done, it's really based off company need. The company will let you know what's important, as they should. And you'll usually be given directive of this is what you need to focus on. Time management is on its own, right? It's a separate skill. To be honest, I have also project management experience that helped me. So I would say if people can actually get some kind of project management type experience, that's going to help you really juggle your own schedule, right? And being able to meet all of these demands in a timely manner.
Great.
Yeah. And so that came in when Patsy was speaking earlier about having that science background and managing projects. So with being a trained scientist, there's a lot of project management with your lab projects. So it's still project management. So there's still a lot of self-direction and, taking the initiative and managing all those schedules. So there's still a lot of that I'm pulling on. I meet with my direct supervisor by phone twice a week. So that helps me stay on target, but then I have my task and I know the task has to get done by a certain date. So it's just a lot of just having to manage yourself and know what needs to be done. And, you have to have it, the schedule, when it has to be done. The remote has been a bit of a challenge for me coming from the site where it was much more reactive. So this is more having to just monitor and stay consistent, but I'm getting there. It's an adjustment for me.
So you're using your Outlook a lot, right?
I have a lot of lists. So my boss was like, "Yeah, you're very organized. I've got all the things I need to do. I have all the lists. I have it just list on list on list."
I put lists in my Outlook at the top on each page. You can actually like where it looks like you're going to schedule a meeting. I just actually put my list there and just don't set a reminder. Yeah.
I have the weekly duties, so they come up on Monday. I have every other week. I've got that coming up as a reminder.
Smart. So, ladies, in your role, what other clinical research roles do you work closely with? Like, do you work with coordinators, CRAs, data?
So for me, typically, it's the main people that I work with daily are people in clinical operations and physicians or medical monitors. That's really the main people that I'm working with. At a certain point in the protocol development process, you kind of encompass every group: statistics, regulatory affairs, drug supply. But my everyday main, it's really usually ClinOps and the physicians.
And then my daily, so I work with the other clinical scientists. So there's another support, and then the senior clinical scientist who I report to. There's a clinical trial manager. another similar role like that. I also work with the data management team closely and the country regional managers, which are above the CRAs. And then every now and again, I'll interact with the CRAs and then also our vendors for our imaging.
Okay. Okay. Now, I know we spoke about this briefly about advanced degrees being necessary for this role, because we felt like PhD is definitely necessary for this role, correct, ladies? I would like to ask, can you name some like continuing education courses that you think will help someone to be successful as a clinical scientist?
I don't think you need a PhD. I think you probably need at least a master's level.
Okay.
But I don't think anyone I work with, I don't think anyone else has a PhD. I think it's just me.
Okay. Okay.
So let me ask you, Antoinette, that's a good thing, because I think that that's something too that people do. I actually get a lot of questions about that, because what I've seen is a lot of the people who don't have, advanced, whether PharmD or whatnot, or a little older.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, exactly. And a lot of the people who are maybe 30 and under are coming in and having to have those advanced degrees. And so what it looks like is that there's been a shift in requirements between generations. Is that something you're experiencing?
I would say so, because I think when I applied, I think it did want a PhD or an MD.
Yeah, it's shifted.
Or PharmD. I don't think you need it, but I think they're requiring it.
Yeah.
It's hard. And I don't know what you could do for continuing education. And I really think this, because for me, so I think the science background where you are doing like independent research is kind of is helpful. And for me, I did a lot of safety monitoring in my last role. And I think those are the two things they looked at the most. So the science background and the safety monitoring background. I don't know what you could do for continuing education other than formal education.
Yeah, I definitely second what Antoinette is saying there. I would say, if anything, what someone could do just to kind of show that they're teaching themselves, which again is very important in these kind of roles, to show that you can take the charge and do things on your own. The FDA actually has guidances on their website that lays out, components of clinical trial protocols, and even some of the assessments that typically the FDA wants to see in a clinical trial. So if someone just wanted to like read those to get some knowledge, why not? Because in your job anyway as a clinical scientist, we're often looking at FDA guidance documents to see what do they want, right? So yeah, that's really the only other thing I could think of as well.
It could be a case where maybe if you had another clinical related role, you could maybe make a lateral move over, like slide on over to clinical scientist. And I don't know where the others come from. I feel like a CRA could be an entry level role because you are doing that safety monitoring. I just don't know what their educational requirements would be. I don't know if they would, lower the bar, if you will, if you had the CRA experience.
Can I just jump in and ask, do you think that this would be something that would be appropriate for like a foreign MD who's, come to this country and is wanting to work in research? Would they have the appropriate skills to be able to carry out this job? Or even somebody who has an MD, but for whatever reason doesn't want to actually practice?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I've seen, it's anybody. Yeah, I've not seen a discrimination against people who come from somewhere else to the U.S. No, I've not seen that. Not for the clinical scientist position. I haven't. What about you, Antoinette?
No, I haven't seen that. Now, like the MDs I work with closely there are clinical directors, so that probably would make more sense to go into that role. But I mean, I think the CS role would also be appropriate.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I am going to pass it off to Bridget here. She's going to ask you guys some questions.
Yeah, and so you've talked kind of a bit about, just your day-to-day and a little bit about how you kind of manage your workflow. But I was just curious as to, what would you say the challenges are in this position that are unique to this position? And either one of you can answer.
I will say, in general, to be honest, with all of these scientist roles, is getting up to speed quickly. If there's a deliverable, right, there's something that's due, The pharma industry, as many of us know who are in the pharma industry, no matter what role we're in, it's very fast paced, right? So you don't have a lot of time. You don't have, a year or two to figure out what's going on. You got to get up to speed pretty quick and hit and go with it. So I would say that's one of the challenges.
Yeah, for me, because I do a lot of safety monitoring for my job mostly, it's a lot of data suddenly. So for me, it was just a big adjusting from a site to a CRO/pharmaceutical company. So that culture shift was difficult for me. And then I just felt like they kept adding new stuff like every day. I was like, okay, this is a lot. This is a whole lot. And you want to do it right. So it's a high level of accuracy is required because you're looking at safety. So you have to do it right. So that's been an adjustment. And then for me, also working remotely has been an adjustment. So, learning how to manage what I'm doing on my own without having to be able to turn to somebody and say, hey, do you understand this? Because, it's kind of me here by myself, trying to navigate a lot of these systems.
Okay, thanks for sharing that. And so it sounds as though you almost have to kind of put on, even though you both have research experience, you have to kind of put on a different hat, in this particular role and kind of look at things from kind of a more in-depth sort of an angle. Would that be accurate? Or could one of y'all speak more on that?
I would say that's accurate just because, people that are coming from heavy research backgrounds can do research in all kinds of things. Like Antoinette, you said genetics. I did cardiovascular research. I have yet to do any kind of cardiovascular trial. So yeah, it's you get to use a lot of the things like, Antoinette mentioned the skills that we got from our heavy research, but a lot of it is novel. So yeah, we're having to, dig in deep and look at things differently while still using the skills that we have.
Yeah, so being able to adjust. So my background was cystic fibrosis in grad school. Then as my postdoc, I work on insulin resistance. Then as a CRC, I was in the stem cell transplant team, and now I'm in kidney cancer. This is a whole new area that I'm having to learn, from scratch, like as we're going.
Okay, interesting. I actually started out in kidney cancer. That's a cool connection. And so I kind of wanted to find out from both of you. So two things. So first, actually, let me ask you, Patsy, so what would be advancement opportunities for somebody who is in the field of clinical science, who's in the role of a clinical scientist? And then for Antoinette, after that, I would like to kind of have you speak a little bit about, what would be the next step if a person were to move past the role of a clinical scientist. So Patsy, we'll let you go first, just speaking of advancement opportunities within being a clinical scientist.
Right. So what I've seen, I've actually seen two different things with clinical scientists. So depending upon the exposure they've had, sometimes clinical scientists jump into leadership positions in regulatory because there's a lot of overlap in that. And then the other one that I've seen is, people advancing to a director or, VP of clinical development at a company. So they would be over the entire clinical development for the company. That's what I've seen.
And then Antoinette, what would you say kind of would be the next step out, or what are, if either one of you wants to share what your next moves would be after this particular role that you're in?
So I agree with Patsy that typically, senior clinical scientists, and there's a senior clinical scientist, and there's directors and the VPs and all of that. We have oversight over multiple projects and making sure like everything is compliant with the company. For me personally, I don't know yet. As I've been here 9 months, and I like it, but I don't know if it's what I want to do permanently. So I'm still trying to figure out where I'd want to go in, say, 2 or 3 years after I feel like I have a good understanding of this role.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm still kind of figuring that out. I like to do a lot of different things and get involved in things. So you never know, like, over the next few years, if I jump to something different. I don't know yet either.
And then Antoinette, what advice would you give to someone who's interested in a role as a clinical scientist, especially as for somebody who's kind of just come into this role, fairly recently?
So and as far as like tips to get into the field,
Yes.
into the role.
So what would, or really just any kind of advice that you would give?
I mean, so the practical tips, I mean, the things I looked at were the safety monitoring. So that was not technically my job as a CRC, but I ended up taking it over because it was there and needed to be done. So I did it. So you like that hands-on safety monitoring of adverse events seems to be helpful. Sorry, I hear my 3-year-old yelling upstairs. He's distracting me. But really like independence, like the ability to sit down and try to figure out what's going on, but the high level of independence. So, read the protocol, read the manuals, like just that independence, I think is essential.
Okay. And then Patsy, the same question. So what advice would you have for someone who's interested in a career as a clinical scientist?
I would say definitely get a mentor, because those people can help you navigate and how to doing it, and finding these fellowships. And I know there was a question of what are the names of the companies, and I am going to give those companies because that's part of the mentorship that I do too, is giving people the name of the companies because people just don't know about these programs. So RO Incorporated, so RHO. I don't know if everybody on the call knows about RO, but it's a CRO. They have a scientist training program. They call it Integrated Product Development Associate, I think is the name. I think they typically hire a new person like every year, or a few people every year. So you can just kind of set up alerts on their website. Now for their program, they do require a postdoc in addition to the advanced degree. So that's the caveat there. There is Acculent. I think it's ACCULENT. It's formerly Cato SMS. They have a training program and it's just called Fellow. And then there is Impact Pharmaceuticals. They have a training program. It's medical writer training program, but you can oftentimes, because medical writers work on all documents, you can jump from a medical writing position into clinical scientist. Those are the main 3 companies that I know of right now in industry that are doing the fellowship programs to train. Again, usually they require at minimum the advanced degree to get in. So MD, PharmD, PhD, DO, what other, scientific advanced degrees there may be that exist. And I can type those in the chat because I see someone wants to.
All right, thank you so much for that information. So at this time, I believe I'm going to turn it back over to Danielle for question and answer.
So we're going to probably rewind a little bit and give Antoinette time to kind of dive into the questions that I wanted to ask you, if that's okay, Antoinette.
No, yeah.
So I know a lot of times when we're talking about clinical scientists, people might not understand like your day-to-day responsibilities. So could you walk us through like a typical day and what exactly you're doing?
Yeah. So I'm still new-ish. I feel like I just want to start with that. I kind of spend all day in Excel. Spend a lot of time in Excel, looking at numbers, trying to figure out what sites are doing. So I don't know if this is helpful. So my last job, so I was at the site, CRC/data manager. I was on putting in the data that would go to the sponsor. So now I'm on the other side looking at all that data coming in from all the sites around the world, the international sites. So it's literally, so most of my duties are just reviewing data. So are sites entering the data? Is it compliant with the protocol? So like some things have special requirements. Like for example, our study is looking at hypertension. So are they following the rules of the protocol? So it's me going through looking at all that data and making sure sites are following the protocol, they're reporting any safety issues in compliance with the protocol. Are they not doing it? So I'm putting in queries. I am, emailing and CRMs, just saying like, hey, what's your site doing? You gotta do it like this. Putting in deviations. So it's really safety monitoring. And then I'm also in charge of the imaging for our study. So making sure again that sites are being compliant with imaging, they're getting their images uploaded, they are reporting like progression, that they're according to the protocol. So I think that's primarily it. We have a fair number of meetings. At this point, I know like they're looking at like an amendment for the protocol. So I will kind of get to watch that process, but I won't be the lead. But at least I'll get to observe that and see how it's done. And since I've been here and since October, we've had 2 data locks with the 3rd one pending. So we're doing a lot of like high level data cleaning and making sure that, we're okay at this time point and reporting that to the data monitoring committees. I think that's primarily it.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I know you mentioned that you went through the CRC path in order to get in. So for the clinical scientist role, they are typically looking for someone who has experience. Are there any entry level? It doesn't seem like there is any type of entry level.
So I'm entry level clinical scientist.
Okay.
So this is kind of like the bottom rung of being a clinical scientist with that background. So either as, I think a CRA would be okay. I think a research nurse, I think anyone who's looking at safety at a site, so a data manager or possibly a clinical research coordinator. Anyone who's looking at, is like the safety signals, safety monitoring, putting in SAEs, putting in data, understanding what that should look like. Anyone looking at, so a lot of what I'm doing is making sure what is being done, it makes sense with the outcomes of the protocol. So from a very scientific point of view, what is the data that's being entered? Does that support the overall objective of the protocol? So I always had that in mind. So even as a CRC/data manager, I was always like, is this supporting the objectives of the research? So same thing now, the data they're putting in, I understand the imaging all ties into our final objectives. So are they doing that to be compliant with the final outcome? So I'm always thinking about essentially the paper that's going to come out at the end. Do we have the correct data to publish this? Do we have the correct data to get this to the FDA for review? That's always kind of been my end goal, even as a CRC. So anything where you have that scientific kind of involvement would be a stepping stone. But this, I don't think there's a more entry-level role of clinical scientist than where I am now.
Okay. Thank you so much, ladies. Let's dive into some of these questions. I know there are quite a bit. So while I am looking through the questions in the chat, if there is anyone that would like to take themselves off of mute, I think it's always good to have people ask questions if they're comfortable with asking questions. You never know when you have the opportunity to have clinical scientists here. So take advantage. Ask the questions while you can. So take yourself off of mute. If you have any questions, you're interested in this role, please let us know.
Hello, ladies. I am interested in the role. And I also put a question in the chat. My name is Nikia. I have 13 years experience working in an acute care setting. I'm currently working remotely as a patient care coordinator and 3 years research experience. I'm in my 40s and have a master's in biotechnology. So what are my chances of getting in to be a clinical scientist?
Oh, I'll just take it. Well, Antoinette, if you want to speak first.
I was just going to ask for clarification. What do your current duties look like? So is it patient care? Are you in research now? Like, what are your current duties?
Well, my current duty as a patient care coordinator, I'm working remotely, but I do counsel patients about COVID and STDs. I explain to them like different infections that occur to them as they have positive results. And I also do like clerical stuff, like request doctor's notes to be sent on behalf of the clinicians, and I order medications on the behalf of the clinicians.
And you said you have an RN?
Well, actually, I went to nursing school, but I didn't finish. But I still remember what I learned in nursing school. I know how to do nursing diagnosis. I know how to pass medications. But
Okay.
life happened and it didn't work out. But I still am familiar with that. With
Right,
those
right.
skills.
You wouldn't have forgotten that. So I wonder for you, because
Antoinette is frozen, right?
Yes.
Okay, I want to make sure it wasn't. It's like,
Uh-oh.
She might be coming back on. Okay, well, while we wait, someone asked, what is a therapeutic area?
so they said, wait, what is a therapeutic area? Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. So it's basically just a disease area. So like cancer. So basically oncology. That's a better one for it. Oncology, hematology. So basically like these categories of diseases. That's basically what a therapeutic area is, just categories of diseases. And while we actually wait for Antoinette to come in, Nakia, based off the experience that you've described you have you ever thought about patient advocacy? Because your experience is literally what they look for in patient advocacy. So what those people do is go out and talk to the actual patients, and they're actually getting data from patients and bringing it back to the physicians and clinical scientists to help us build studies that better suit that disease. Your experience really aligns that if and that's what they call it. It's like patient advocacy. That's usually what you'll see in the job titles. Most pharma companies have a whole department of people that do that. So I mean, if you were interested in, also just other career paths that you might have never heard of, patient advocacy might be a good one for you.
Okay, I'll be happy to read more about that patient advocacy. Where do I look?
Yeah, so I mean, if you go on LinkedIn and you search, like, you can search jobs on LinkedIn. I would just type in the word patient advocacy, and you'll see jobs pop up, and you'll see the job descriptions. You can start connecting with people that work at those companies that do those jobs and seeing, they can tell you more about it. Because I mean, you could always take a stab at the clinical scientist, but I could honestly see a company trying to pull you into patient advocacy because your experience would be very helpful to a pharma company in that situation.
I would leverage your patient experience because we don't see anything near patients. We don't know any patient names.
True.
And guys are looking for that, especially for, Black women to come in and interact with patients, talk about the therapies. So I would try to play up those skills because that's something that is being sought after.
Oh, so as a clinical scientist, you're pretty much isolated.
I mean, it's literally just spreadsheets.
Yeah, I don't talk to patients. No. No, we don't talk to patients.
I mean, I IDs.
Okay.
Yeah. We see the numbers, right, that associate with them, but no, we don't talk to patients. No.
And I would even say, I mean, since you do have some nursing education, if you wanted to go back to school, I think you have to have an RN, like
I think so.
Clinical research nurse, you still have that patient interaction, and that's still an essential part of clinical research. But I think you have to finish your RN to do that. But you can be a patient advocate while you are in school and have them pay for that, because if you work for a hospital, they'll pay for that degree.
That's a good idea, Antoinette.
Someone else pay for it. That's
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. Well, thank you, ladies.
sure.
So we always get this in the group. Would you say that a clinical scientist role is good for someone that's an introvert?
Yeah. Yeah. I identify as an introvert, and I found out I'm not as introverted as I thought I was. But if you were happy to sit and just look at your spreadsheets and look at your thing, like your databases, I mean, this is a great fit. We actually do have more meetings than I used to have at the site, but it's on days we don't have meetings, it's just me with my headphones in and just working away, and I mean, that'd be a good fit.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we have a couple of hands that are raised. Marilyn?
Yes, hello, good night. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, so I actually have a couple of questions, but just a little bit about me. I have a PhD in biomedical sciences. I've been teaching for the last 4 years, and I'm interested in getting into becoming a clinical scientist. First question is there any way to get in, right, as an entry level just with a PhD, or is the only way to get in is through the fellowship?
I
That's my
would
first
say
question.
fellowship.
That's the
Or
only, yeah.
CRA.
Like that's one of the biggest ways. Like when people have no experience, like I'll keep telling there's all kind of paths, but make sure people look for those fellowships, because that's what they're looking for. People who just come out of PhD with no experience or postdoc, they'll take you.
Okay.
You've
Okay.
got teaching experience. Oh yeah, they'll definitely take you for sure.
Okay. My second question, I think is Antoinette mentions a lot about spreadsheet. Patsy, are you experiencing that same experience?
So for me, I do a little bit of a lot of things. So most of my time is developing the protocols and then also monitoring the data. But I'm not the only one monitoring the data. There's the physicians monitoring the data, clin operations, etc. So for me, most of my day is not more so toward the doing the spreadsheets, but a lot of that stuff depends on how the company you're at is structured, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of it just depends on that, right? So we're all going to do similar things, right? But how much of one thing we do more than the other, a lot of that depends on the company.
Yeah. So because I came into a study that was already open, they didn't need a protocol. If I were coming into a new study, so if I were to say get reassigned, I might have the opportunity to then develop that protocol for a new study, but I came into one that was already running.
Yep.
And so when you're designing protocols, are you like the PI, or are you working with a team and designing a protocol based on a specific drug and the impact you want to have? What really guides the design of the protocol?
Okay, so I'll take that one. So a lot of this is based off corporate objectives, right? So it's, okay, what disease are we targeting? And you want to look at, have anybody else done any kind of trials in those patients? And you have to dig deep in the literature, because a lot of the way you design a trial is, like you mentioned, is going to be around how the disease itself functions. And then while at the same time, you have to take into account any kind of requirements that the FDA may have, which, that can dictate a lot of things that you have. But literally every functional area at a company, from data management, statistics, your physicians, your clinical operations, we all work together to make the protocol. That it's a full collaborative effort. The clinical scientist is the lead, right? So I'm the lead on it, but I have to get the statistics section, because there's a whole statistics section. I don't write that. The statistics group write that, because I'm not a statistician, but we'll work together to see what makes sense, right? But it's a group effort. I don't know if you wanted to add anything, Antoinette.
That's that sounds right. I haven't gotten to that part of my role yet, but yeah, sounds about right.
Thank you guys so much. I'm really enjoying this and learning a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Courtney.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I have two questions. The first one's really straightforward and brief. Pastor, you mentioned that the FDA has some information about protocol development, that if someone wanted to educate themselves on that, they could go to that. If at some point tonight or maybe message offline where we could find that,
Sure, yeah.
that would be great.
Let me write that down. Yeah, because the FDA website is tricky to navigate.
It is. So
oh yeah, I know.
Put it in the chat or something.
Yeah, let me.
And then my second question is, so just briefly, so I'm a PA, so not an MD, but I have all the same skill set. Lots of patient care experience. I've applied to some clinical scientist roles and talked to some recruiters, and what I keep the issue I'm running into is, you need some clinical trial operations experience, probably 1 or 2 years, in order to get into this position. So it's like, you can't go right into a CRA role, right? We know that you need some experience for that too. And then I'm applying for entry-level roles and being told, well, you have too much experience to be a CTA. You're overqualified for that. So it's like it's frustrating. So I'm like, okay, I don't know. I'm not sure which way to go here. So what advice would you have as far as, some valuable experience I could get at a CRO, or, that I wouldn't be considered overqualified for, because I think I'm not getting a look because I do have a master's and I am a PA, and I'm completely and totally willing to do that and pay my dues. Like, I'm not saying I need to come right in and get a 6-figure job. I'm open to that, but I'm not getting the shot.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I would. So this is a bold tactic that I don't think many people use. I've used this tactic during my career. Email the company, literally, like on the websites where there's like info at whatever. Email the company, and I know people who've done this and gotten themselves into internships. Email the company and say, hey, my name is this is my experience. I really like your company. Say why. Okay, because they want, they want to know your interest, right? Say why. Say, I would like to come in and do an internship. You probably got to throw the free in there, okay? Because to catch their attention, I'm willing to come in and do like a free internship. And I would like to work something out with you all if you're open to that, like a free internship for clinical scientists. That stuff does work. Like literally the first job I ever applied to come out of grad school, I did that and I got a response the next day.
Wow.
People are shocked.
Okay.
Those methods are bold, but they can work. And it's not a guarantee, but
Right.
I know a lot of people who've done it and it works.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one way you can do it. That's just an idea that just came to my head.
I'm about to say I did it. Everyone was rejecting me in the clinical research industry. I started cold calling clinical research clinics. I told them, what I'm interested in. And a lot of times, like Dr. Thrasher said, you have to be bold. You have to tell people what exactly you want, what exactly you're looking for. If people are telling you no, don't take no for an answer. Keep knocking on as many doors, because somewhere or a company along the line is going to want the experience that you have, and the experience that you have is valuable. It's just finding that company that feels like, oh my goodness, Courtney, where have you been? Like, so once you tell people, and once you're passionate and genuine and say, look, this is what I'm interested in. I want to do this. I know how to do this, but I just want to learn more about this so I can put my transferable skills in place with the position that you have. So be bold in your approach. I was sending people, like going up to clinics, giving them my resume, but this was 5 years ago. And it just so happened that when I was calling these clinical research clinics, it was a Black-owned clinical research clinic. So they pretty much were like, almost in a sense, like it was like a party. Hey, girl, like you want to learn more about clinical research? Okay, we'll teach you. So a lot of times that's all it really takes. And once you can connect with people, and
Yeah.
I always tell people too, go to these conferences. Next
Yep.
week, I'm going to the DIA conference, and I didn't know a lot of times. And a lot of times people think this is expensive, but it's free to go into the conference center. All of the people in the industry are going to be at the same place at one time. And if you're connected to all the people on LinkedIn, they have it to where you can set up a meeting with the people at the company. You don't even have to be registered for the event. So you can send these people an email, and I can send you several people. And depending on where you're located, I can send you also people that you can network with. But a lot of this within the industry, and what we talked about earlier before everyone came on, a lot of this is about who you know.
That's
and
right.
a lot of this is about networking and stepping outside of your comfort zone. So you have to have your elevator pitch ready to go. You never know when is the opportunity. You might have 2 or 3 minutes to tell this person, this is what I'm interested in. And that conversation can change your life, and you just never know. So putting yourself out there, and it's very important, especially with getting into this industry, if you don't have that experience. And so
That's right.
I do it all the time. I tell people to do it all the time. Be bold in your approach, step outside your comfort zone, because you're a lot of times you're only going to get that opportunity if you're uncomfortable, and you'll see the doors will start to open. So, I know we talked on in LinkedIn messaging. So, feel free. I got all the tips in the world to get in and break down these doors to get into clinical research.
Yes, I feel like I'm doing the right things. Like I'm staying positive. I feel like, something's gonna happen, but it's just like that, you're overqualified for that. But I'm not getting, it's like.
So you just be like, thank you, next. Keep moving.
Yep.
Like don't even get, once they say all of that, be like, okay, I wouldn't even, okay, thank you. And that's it.
Right.
And go on to somebody else, because all it takes is one yes. So whoever is not receiving you and what you're trying to do, don't even worry about it, because there's someone that will, and they will appreciate your experience that you have.
Okay.
So
Thank you very much.
Experienced that. So I just want to say, 'cause I know we're kind of probably running out of time. So part of it also like selling myself.
Yeah.
Because people in like, I don't know, in the I was applying to a hospital role, like they don't understand what academia is, what research is. So I had to sell myself like, this is why you need me, not why I need you. This is why you want PhD trained scientists to come in for me as an entry level CRC role and run your trials. And as soon as I showed up, I'm like, okay, well now I'm running your trials. You want to hire me. But I had to make them see like what I could bring to them that they wouldn't get from someone with, right out of college, for example. So you have to be able to explain in simple terms what you can do for them, and then be bold. So have that part ready, and then go be bold.
All right, we're going to take these 2 questions here. Sydney.
Good evening.
Good evening.
First of all, thank you all for having this event. I'm currently an educator. I've been teaching high school for the past 4 years. I have a PhD in biological sciences with a concentration in microbiology. I've been a college professor. I've been a medical lab technician, and I have been trying to get into clinical research for at least 6 years. I've gotten more no's than yeses.
I say it took me 4 years to get my CRC role. It took me 4 years to get my CRC role.
And I stopped looking for a while because I was discouraged. So my question is, with these fellowships, and I'm located in Nashville, I looked up the companies that you all suggested in the chat. A lot of them are not in Tennessee. So are they all virtual? Because I have a child who's autistic and I can't just leave her to get into this role. So as far as those fellowships are considered, I've also been applying to the coordinator positions here locally because I'm an introvert. I like spreadsheets. I really don't have to be bothered with people. And data's a big thing to me. I love it. So I've heard all the direction, but the research coordinator fellowship role, how do those fellowships work? Like, what do you have any tips on making yourself more marketable with the skills that you have, like those transferable skills, soft skills, all that good stuff? Do you have any like tips on how to sell yourself?
So I guess I'll go first. So like for the like where you have to be in the location the company is. The fellowships that I know of pre-COVID, yeah, they were asking people to be there because they're like, oh, you got to learn whatever. But during COVID, it's like, oh, people can learn without being physically here. So now they're like, sure, the person can be somewhere else if you're comfortable with learning virtually, which most people, I think are, and I'm not marrying anyone who had that kind of problem. Then, yeah, so I think a lot of it too is sometimes how you build a resume, because some that's kind of sometimes the hardest part too, is like you have to make sure that you're tailoring resumes right to the position and what people want to see first, because a lot of times people don't spend a lot of time looking at those resumes, like recruiters and stuff. I think most recruiters say it's like 5 seconds and they're like, I look at the like first 3 lines and the next, so making sure that you have a clinical scientist, if that's what you're trying to do, look at your resume and connect you, which I don't mind doing. Like, I'm still in touch with my old manager from my last job. And so, if somebody, it's like, hey, can you, pass my resume along? I do that. Say, I text her, hey, are you guys hiring for a fellow right now? If you are, look, I got somebody that I'm vouching for, and send it over. Like Danielle said, a lot of this stuff is just networking. It's who you know as well, and having somebody being an advocate for you. So it could be that, if, you might want to have clinical scientists look over your resume, make sure that it's structured right, and then help you start getting those connections that are useful for you, right? That would be my biggest thing, because you definitely have the background and everything. You've got that for sure.
Thank you.
I would say too, Sydney, I don't know how active you are in the Tennessee group, but reach out to the members that are from Nashville, and just, it's good to have that support system, especially when you're applying to these positions and you're like, oh my goodness. So having that local support system is very important too. So, reaching out to the ladies that's in Nashville, there's a lot. There's probably about 20 or 30 of them that are in Nashville. So just, a lot of times too, just putting a post out there in the group and telling people, when you post that message in the group or post in the group and you're genuine, you're like, hey, look, y'all, I'm in Nashville just like you. I'm trying to get in. This is my background. Do you know somebody? A lot of times it just takes being a little bit vulnerable and telling people where you're at to see who, because we're going to help you. It's not like you're going to make this post and nobody's going to respond and not going to help you. We're going to help you. Like that's what we do. So, just putting yourself out there, and, you can also send me a message and we can figure out, because 6 years is too long. So we need to come up with a different plan, because whatever plan we have to come up with something completely different. Okay. Because, continuing to kind of doing the same thing, we have to figure out a whole different way to do it. And you can tell me what you've been doing, so that way we can do the opposite.
And I'm doing the opposite now, because as I posted, my introversion can be a hindrance. I don't have stage fright. I just am a hermit, and I'm working on not being a hermit, because I was a lab rat. So I'm cool with just being in a lab with my AirPods and my headphones in, doing what I need to do. So I've changed by reaching out to several people that are on this call and joining the group on Facebook. I just joined the group on Facebook maybe Monday. So it's the slow process.
Okay. Well, I know when it comes to introvert, you have to take your time and do it on your own pace. So, even though I might encourage some stuff, I still want you to kind of do it on your own pace. I don't want to push you to the point where you're like, oh my goodness, Danielle, why are you telling me to do all this? But just on your own time, to start networking, and reaching out to people who hold the title. Like, reaching out to Patsy and Antoinette after this, and just seeing,
Right.
you know, if they can give you some useful
Mhm.
tips.
I will.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. This is our
Thank
last
you.
question. You are so welcome. Our last question, Ashley.
Hello, ladies. I'm sitting in the dark, so I don't think there's a point of me turning the camera on. So thank you for having this event. Really appreciate it. Very, very informative. So I am about to finish my PhD. I have a master's in biomedical science. I was working in pharmacology. My PhD is in community health and human services. I currently work in my field right now, do community-based participatory research. And so in my role, I do a lot of, well, I'm a data collector, but because we're a small team, I do a little bit of everything, you know? So I'm wondering, like, starting to get into the job market. If that's enough to leverage, I've been in my role for about 5 years. And I'm wondering, like, if I enter into the fellowship, are there other pathways or roles that I would get some training or experience for? So I was listening to Antoinette say that she does a lot of looking at spreadsheets. I know that would bore me to death. I do enjoy the aspect of working with participants or interacting with different teams of people. So I was curious at, like, how diverse the role of that the clinical research scientist position is.
Well, for the fellowships in particular, that's a good point you brought up. So a lot of how those fellowships are set up is you come in and they expose you to like several different scientists, like regulatory scientists, non-clinical scientists. It's like the people who do chemical manufacturing controls. I forgot the name of that scientist. Pharmaceutical development scientists. They do a lot of the chemistry. Clinical scientists. So a lot of them will expose you to those things, and then you pick one. Mm-hmm. So then you set the pace. So that's one of the reasons why I do like those fellowships, is because it's not just like, hey, we're only going to show you this. They'll show you a lot of different things, and then in the year say, what do you want to do? And I picked clinical scientist, right? But I could have picked something else. I just was more interested in the clinical scientist path. But I think, you're doing right by starting now, before you graduate. That is the best time, to see what's out there. And, if anybody, like, I said, these fellowships and stuff that people don't know about, if anybody has any like additional questions after this, particularly about those fellowships and things like that, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I can try to also connect you with other people who have come up through fellowships and gone to other companies that I probably are not thinking about, that those people can network with you. But yeah, the fellowship one is really good just because it gives you that flexibility with your career. Like you can pick one, after the fact.
Okay, and then one more question. Are these fellowships paid?
Oh, yeah. These are positions. These are positions, contract, and everything. It's just the title. They're just calling it. That's the title for the job at certain companies. They're just calling them fellowships, but they're paid. Yeah, they're not like internships. It's a whole different thing.
So do you think it would kind of be equivalent to doing a postdoc? Well, maybe this is like considered an industry postdoc?
You could say that, yeah. It's basically like an equivalent of an industry postdoc, except it's just much shorter, right? It's much, much shorter. And, you move on much quicker. Yep.
Noted. Thank you so much. I'll definitely be looking into that and reaching out. I can hear. You're muted.
Oh, you're muted, Danielle.
I'm just over here talking. Thank you. I was going to say thank you, everyone. And do we have any final thoughts? Any of our speakers wanting to add or co-host before we end our meeting? Antoinette? Dr. Thrasher? Any final thoughts for
well, I guess my final thoughts is, just don't be discouraged. Like Danielle said, a lot of this stuff is it's a lot of networking, and you a lot of times you do get a lot of no's before you get a yes. But that's what this group is for, right? Is to help. So I'm always willing to help. So reach out to me for sure. I love mentorship. So you gotta pass the torch, right?
Yes. Lift as you climb, right?
That's right.
Okay, Bridget, Beatrice.
I just want to thank each of our speakers for the information today. A clinical scientist is definitely something I think that's more of kind of like in the background position. So it's not something that people always see in the foreground like a CRA or a CRC. So, I really appreciate the opportunity that you guys have taken to share your knowledge and share your path with all of us this evening.
Definitely. This was definitely a great event, wealth of knowledge. And I feel like we're going to have some new clinical sciences soon.
Hopefully so.
Yes. They're gonna be like, where all these Black women, Black men, where all these clinical sciences come from? But yes, thank you so much for sharing. I always feel like after we have these meetings that I learned so much. A lot of positions I'm not all that familiar with. It's funny how you can be in the clinical research industry, but not know what everyone else is doing and their job responsibilities, maybe because it's just so many different positions. It's like we're connected, but in a sense we're not connected because but I'm grateful that we have these meetings where people can learn more about the different positions. And I hope that this has been helpful to everyone. I hope that you took notes. Please feel free to drop your information, your LinkedIn information. Please also feel free to reach out to the speakers. Don't be afraid, to reach out, step outside of your comfort zone. If you want something, you have to go for it. And if you need help, don't be afraid to ask. No question is a dumb question. Everyone had to start somewhere. We all had to start. So feel free to reach out to me, myself, the speakers. Thank you so much, Bridget and Beatrice and Dr. Thrasher and Dr. Hillian. And you guys have a good night. I'm gonna keep the chat up for a little bit so everyone can get the information for the LinkedIn URL. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, y'all have a great night.
Ladies.